fellow flutists. I want to introduce to you today a good friend and colleague, Jean Bishop, who is a longtime freelancer in the Chicago area, principal flute of Elgin Symphony, piccolo of Rockford Symphony, does the regional orchestra circuit, subbing and wedding gigs, church gigs, etc. So a seasoned freelancer, very experienced freelancer. And so we're very fortunate to get her to talk with us a bit today about navigating freelancing, how you got started, just the ins and outs, because really all that stuff about freelancing, like the art of freelancing, isn't taught, I don't think, in school, or I was never taught anything. You just sort of do it and figure it out as you go. So I think that a lot can be learned from talking to someone who is currently doing it and has done it for a long time. So that's you. So question number one would be, like, how long have you been freelancing? What are we talking about here? How many years approximately?
Well, I'll be honest. I graduated college in 1975. That's a long time ago. So, I pretty much started as soon as I got out of school. And I started with actually doing concerts in the parks here in Chicago with my high school band director. And he said, "Oh, if you just join the musicians union, you can play these trust fund concerts." So I did a lot of those band concerts for a long time. And then as a very young player, I did come into the Elgin Symphony. But along with that and prior to that, just whatever freelance work I could pick up.
Yeah. So joining the union seems key, right? Either during-ish college, but especially right after college. And then you make the connections with, your band director or not, that you can make some connections in that way. Yeah, like the trust fund gigs. Are they still happening, the trust fund gigs?
Well, I don't think they call them that anymore. When I played during the summer with the Park Ridge Fine Arts Society, I think they just call it the Music Performance Fund.
That's right.
I don't know the
Yeah.
semantics of it, but yeah, there is still that fund still exists in some form.
Okay.
Yeah. But union membership, yeah, it's going to, if you're not in the union, it will shut you out of some jobs because, not because contractors want to be mean, but because those orchestras are part of a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement, and they just simply can't hire you unless you're a union member.
Yeah, that's vital information to know too. And then also being a union member, you have the audition ads through the International Musician paper, which you can just get online, being a union member. But I know for myself, not so much anymore, but back in audition days, first of the month, I'd always just go right to the online AFM, get audition ads, and then you have access to all openings, regional orchestra and full-time ICSOM orchestras in the country. And then you that's how you find out how to audition, and then it tells you what you need, resume, whatever. You really have to start with the union.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that you could always get this information from a colleague or from a teacher, but again, it's better to be able to go to the source yourself.
Right. And so, like, going through your career, so you started with your connection with your band director, and you did the trust fund gigs, and then you got Elgin Symphony, and then I would say from Elgin Symphony, for me anyway, being in Elgin Symphony, that was really key to branching out to playing other gigs. So would you agree that, like, for instance, Ross Beecraft, the principal trumpet, is I think he's still an active contractor in Chicago, and he's in the symphony, in the orchestra. So sometimes contractors are in these regional orchestras. There's people to know, so to speak, where you have the connection. Did you have some of those connections from Elgin, like I did? Like when I joined Elgin, it was like, oh, I was able to play other gigs almost immediately because of connection of you and Scott Metlica playing in Rockford and other places. And having a contractor be in the orchestra, and Adam, trombone player, was a contractor for some things, and there were people in there. So did you have that same experience?
Yes, and being from Chicago and going into the Elgin Symphony, and for those who don't know, Elgin is a suburb of Chicago. Some of these people I went to school with, or they were part of kind of the triumvirate, if you will, of the music schools, which would be Chicago Musical College of Roosevelt University, now called Chicago College of
The
Performing
arts.
Arts,
Yeah.
DePaul University, and Northwestern University in Evanston. So if you went to one of those schools, chances are very good that you would know a lot of people who went to those other schools
Mhm.
just because, I mean, you would see them at concerts, or perhaps you would have played in the civic orchestra together.
Right, right.
So you tend to just kind of know this group of people. But yes, I would agree with your statement that Elgin and other orchestras like that, if there are contractors as active players in that orchestra, then yeah, they're going to hear you, and you know, work will come your way if when they hear you, they like what they hear.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And another, I think, I don't want to get too sidetracked from just talking about how you're navigating through freelancing, but it reminds me of the topic. I find as I'm reflecting back on freelancing and what's important, I keep coming back in my own notes, like your attitude, your personality, your manners, that seems to always come to the forefront. And maybe just because I'm older freelancer, I think those are, I don't know, I just think about that more. So if you play in the Elgin Symphony, or you get in to sub with a regional orchestra community and you have the context, I think to also note, and I think you would agree, that your behavior on the stage and just professionalism, having your part prepared, and basic etiquette, showing up on time, of course, and things
Mhm.
like that go a long way. Because I think contractors want to know that you're going to, for one, show up on time, and then two, just play the job, and then
Mhm.
three, you're going to be great, because all flute players are great, I swear, right? Like everybody's great. That's not even in the equation anymore. But
Right.
so I think that's a big thing, and a big reason for longevity, like you
Mhm.
have, having the etiquette, and being workable, being somebody
Mhm.
that the contractor wants to call again, to work with everyone else.
And of course, I would add it's not just the contractor, because if your
Right.
contractor is like the bass trombone player, he or she is not necessarily going to know how you fit into the flute section. All of that information is going to come from the principal back
Right.
to the contractor. So yes, so it definitely helps to be pleasant and friendly and prepared. I think a stage etiquette, it's funny. It's not something that's taught, like you say,
Mm.
and it's not something that people think about a whole lot. But, if you're a principal player, for example, which I am in Elgin, if I have somebody over to the right out of the corner of my eye that I can see that's fidgeting, or they're moving around a lot, or they're on their phone while I'm trying to play a solo,
Uh-huh.
even though they're resting,
Uh-huh.
um, that really sets me on edge, and I'm pretty sure that other principal players would agree with that. And it would work the same way for the piccolo player who would be on the other side of that
Mhm.
second flutist, because that player might have a big important solo coming up too.
Right.
I will say that the only time and place that I ever have my phone out is in the two orchestras I play in regularly, and only when I am not playing for literally an entire movement or an entire piece if I can't get off the stage. And even then, I have like my polishing cloth and my cleaning cloth, and I'll kind of, like set the phone in them and
Right.
just kind of, I'm kind of like this. I'm very discreet about it. And some people would, probably disagree and say, well, you really should not even do that. I think if you're a substitute, that's probably good advice. And when I am subbing on a job, I absolutely never do that. I wouldn't dream
Right.
of it. It's only the two places where I'm most comfortable. And
Right. I
and
totally agree
yeah,
with you because I was
yeah.
talking about in a previous video about stage etiquette. I got to phone, and my thing should be don't be on your phone. But then if I'm honest, I'm on my phone sometimes, but it just depends. Like you said, I would only do it in Elgin Symphony in certain circumstances because when I'm comfortable that I know it would be okay if I do it right and if I'm very discreet. And like you said, I can't leave the stage. It's a rehearsal only. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, only, yeah, of
yeah.
course.
That goes
But
without saying.
you would think that'd be obvious, but you know, only in a rehearsal and only, if it's a very casual, relaxed list of pops tunes and you just can't leave the stage and you're stuck there, not playing like the next 5 tunes or something. Yeah, you could, it just depends. But every once in a while, that sound can come on. Remember that funny time at Scott's phone? We were doing this exact same thing. I think it was rehearsal for something. Like we all in the winds had a lot of time. And Scott had his phone and it said, he had his volume off, but whatever app he was on said, ready, okay.
Yeah, it was. I do remember that. It was like Waze or some navigation app.
Yeah, it was
All
Wade.
set. Let's
Yeah.
go.
He
You
just,
know, that said, accidents happen.
right.
Um, oh my gosh, I remember one incident where a second violinist sitting in front of me had his cell phone in his tux pocket, but he hadn't turned it off. And he must be like the most popular guy in the world because he kept like getting call after call after call. And
Oh
this was during a
no.
concert. And it was, what's the Brahms symphony where the slow movement ends with this huge clarinet solo? Um, the fourth, maybe. And the principal clarinet, of course, sitting behind me. And he was just like so rattled. And I won't even repeat what he said. But,
Yeah,
when the
thank you.
movement was over, he kind of hissed over my shoulder a warning to that
Yeah.
violin player. So do not ever let that happen. I am so paranoid about my phone. I not only turn the volume off and turn it down, I literally turn my phone off. I think
Yeah,
it's
to be
good
safe.
advice. Just
Because
do it.
sometimes every once in a while, it'll just go off for like an Amber Alert, which I guess you can do your settings to turn that off. Or each app has its own setting, it seems. I don't know. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so that's a great topic though, because it really, for a sub, like you said, just don't ever do it. It's just, it can look so bad. Would you agree? Like it
Yes.
just looks
Yes.
really, really tacky.
Yeah, it just looks bad. It's not a good optic, and it looks like you're not engaged.
Right.
And I know it can be really boring to sit there like, it's the second movement of a Beethoven piano concerto, and there's like literally 300 bars of rest.
Right.
But again, if you're a freelancer, if you're a sub in a particular orchestra, I would not do it.
Yeah. And so what are some other with freelancing difficulties do you think, or that you've come across, like with freelancing in general? Are there obstacles or to, kind of getting in the scene?
Yes. Well, I think in some ways, since I've been at it for decades, I'm looking at it through a different lens.
Hmm.
I do feel bad for younger players now
Hmm.
because there's so many of them. And as you said, Julia, everybody is amazing.
Yep.
Everybody is fantastic. So it is hard to get a foothold. I think, if you can just be politely persistent, always offer to play for people,
Hmm.
but don't have your feelings hurt if they don't take you up on it. Oftentimes, what I would do in Elgin, I would get these emails on a fairly frequent basis. What I would do is I would go to you and I would go to Scott, since you're both younger than I, and there's a good chance that you would know younger players. And I would be like, Julia, do you know this person? Have
Mhm.
you worked with this person? What do you think? Or I would ask the same of Scott. And the most important question, Scott and Julia, do you think this person would be a good fit to play second flute to me
Right.
or to play piccolo in
Mhm.
Elgin Symphony? Would this person blend? Would this person would they click?
Which goes
So
to show
so that
again, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, which accentuates the concept of that the music world is very, very small. So where
yeah.
you play, how you play, again, coming back to manners, I guess that's my thing, but like
Hmm.
it gets back. So what's this person like?
Yes.
Well, they were late, or,
Mhm.
so I don't know, like they forgot their piccolo, so I don't know, or, that gets back.
It
um,
really does. Yeah, because every great once in a while I would hear from Scott, yeah, that person has technique out the wazoo and a great sound, but she tried to talk to me for the entire rehearsal.
right, right.
Don't do that.
Right. Just don't talk, be self-aware. There's just certain things you don't do. Like however you're supposed to ideally behave in youth symphony, you absolutely have to do that in a professional setting or any kind of adult community orchestra even setting if you want to keep being invited back, you
Yeah,
know.
actually bringing up youth symphony etiquette is really a good point, or your college orchestra. It seems, if you're 15 or 16 or 18 or 19 years old, these settings seem a little restrictive sometimes.
Yeah.
But I tell you, when you get out of conservatory, you know how to behave, or you should.
Yeah.
Um, as a quick aside, my daughter went to Oberlin and graduated in 2016. And if you arrived less than 15 minutes before a rehearsal, or maybe it was even 30, I don't even remember, but it was some rather large amount of time, the student manager of that orchestra was on the phone to you. Where are you?
Right.
So it was really drilled into you. You you don't do that. So those assuming you went to a music school that was pretty structured about that, you should have some good training.
Right. Because the downbeat starts with or without you there.
Oh yes.
So we get built into us, I think, like a certain amount of anxiety. We'll call it healthy anxiety. Um, to get there on time,
Hmm.
early is on time,
Hmm.
and give yourself time to set up and all that stuff. So difficulties or obstacles with freelancing is that there's so many flute players, right? You said, and just everyone is amazing. So then the difficulties are just being connected and I think also, would you have advice for, so say I've had students through the youth symphony in Milwaukee when I did the flute choir who would come up to me and say, how do you even get to play with the Elgin Symphony? Like they don't even know, like to sub. I don't mean to audition and be a member, but
Hmm.
or the Kenosha Symphony or Racine Symphony that are professional, regional. So you're being paid per service. Like how would one that's like maybe a music student just starting out or has graduated from music school, what do they do if they want to be considered on a sub list for any kind of
Hmm.
regional, well, even any kind of orchestra at all? What do you think they should do?
I think one big part of that equation is having a good and long-term relationship with your teacher.
Yeah.
So if you went to the University of Milwaukee, for example, and you're trying to work in Wauwatosa and Madison and Appleton, places like that, um, there could be a chance that the contractor or personnel manager might call up the flute teacher or email. Nobody calls
I
these
know we just
days,
say
but you know
call
what I
now. It's
mean.
like rolling
Yeah.
down the window.
Yeah. So you always want to keep yourself in a position of receiving a glowing recommendation from your teacher. And your teacher can say perhaps something like, well, I know the principal flute of the Madison Symphony. Why don't I give him or her a call and just put a bug in their ear? And, maybe they'll they'll give you a try because as a teacher, they respect my opinion.
Hmm.
Another thing you can do is just kind of make cold calls, so to speak. But again, who calls anymore? It
Cold
would be an
emails, yeah.
email. Yeah. And I've had this happen a number of times. Hello, my name is blah blah. I just got a master's from Juilliard, and
Yeah.
I live in Chicago now. I'm playing in the Civic Orchestra. And for those who don't know, Civic Orchestra, it used to be called the Training Orchestra of the Chicago Symphony. And indeed, some people have matriculated from Civic into CSO. I would say that's maybe a little bit less common now, but it's still a very, very good orchestra that is paid now. It didn't used to be. If you contact the principals in the area orchestras and send your resume. Sometimes I see the most stunning resumes you can possibly imagine. Like this
Yeah.
person is 10 times more educated than I am.
Hmm.
They have undergrad and masters and a DMA,
Yeah. Yeah.
everything else. So so anyway, yeah, just keep putting yourself out there. Here we have the Chicago Flute Club, and I think that's an excellent source of networking, just to meet other flutists and also to serve in some capacity, like volunteer coordinator or competition coordinator.
Hmm.
People will learn your name very quickly,
Very
and they
true.
will also, yes, and they will also learn whether you are efficient
Right.
in what you've been asked to do. So I don't know if there's a flute club based where you are, Julia, but
Yeah,
there
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 is.
was,
Yeah.
yeah. But in Milwaukee or in Wisconsin, certainly there was some
There,
sort of flute thing,
yeah,
wasn't
there's
there?
not an official flute society or club there, but there is a tight connection of flute players
Yeah.
that mostly consists of the flute teachers. But it's a great group, and everyone knows each other. And but that's an excellent suggestion, is the teacher as your resource, your primary resource. Because when I think about it, after you said that, I remember students, or not students, but I would get emails like, can you play some, like, kind of a community orchestra or any kind of orchestra around town in the Milwaukee area? And if I couldn't do it, I would think, and they've gone through the other flute players in Milwaukee, and they would ask me, do you have any names? And I would think, students, do I have any really great students, that are
Hmm.
mature enough to hand, that I know that would show up because they've always showed up to their lessons, they're prepared, like, and then I do, and then I text my student, might you be interested and available to do this last minute gig, and I've had a couple students that actually went off and did those gigs. So yeah, I never really even thought about that I actually helped. But yeah, so your private teacher and then a flute club is great, because when I first moved to Chicago, I got involved, I joined the flute club, Chicago Flute Club. And like you said, just those names on the it was an actual newsletter back then.
Hmm.
But I got to know those names, the secretary, the president, the whatever. And then you just kind of get in that circle. And then if you can
Hmm.
be involved, then you're in that circle.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's another great way to get connected into the scene.
I think another way to do it is, if you could take some lessons with, I would say, if you can identify who is like the absolute top freelancer in your area. I
Mhm.
mean, yes, it always helps, of course, go take a lesson with the principal of the Chicago Symphony or
Sure.
the Milwaukee Symphony or the Hawaii Symphony if you can get them to see you.
Right, right. Yeah, it's
That
much
also off,
harder.
yeah, it often can be a little tricky. But
Yeah.
if you can identify one or two or three people who seem to really be the very top people who are not in the Chicago Symphony, who are not necessarily in the lyric opera orchestra,
Right. Like
go take,
freelance.
yes,
Yeah.
go take lessons with them and ask their advice.
Mhm.
You're paying them for their time. If you want to talk for the whole 30 minutes, just talk for the whole 30 minutes.
So true.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think anything that those type of people, they're in such a rarefied crowd
Yeah.
could really give you some very helpful advice and a flute lesson.
Yeah. You can, or you could do half hour, just like interview style maybe, or you can come prepared with some questions, or just a freestyle talking, like all the
Yes.
things we're talking about now. And it also helps, I think, to let the teacher or the freelancer that you want, that has the connections, know that you're interested, because no one's going to know if you're interested in freelancing, but they're just not going to know. There's so many of us out there. Everyone's amazing. You have to make yourself known, and of course that's tricky. Like, you don't want to be annoying, or you just have to be careful about that. But paying for a lesson where you want to ask questions is a excellent way to, one, let that teacher or freelancer know you're interested, and
Hmm.
two, get the information firsthand.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
everything in freelancing is experience based.
Hmm.
The skill is all based on experience. So
Hmm.
you have to tap into that. It's nothing you're going to learn at school necessarily. I mean, you learn all about flute technique and other things flute related, but like managing or how to connect and who to call or who not to call. Like, this person does not like phone calls, or like you might get that information.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, that's a great idea. Well, for like Elgin Symphony, so you're the principal flute of the Elgin Symphony. So could an aspiring flute player that wants to be considered on your sub list, because the principal flute generally has their own sub list.
Hmm.
And so to get on your sub list, um, that person could then email you or contact you in some way, probably even just, now it's easy with social media,
Hmm.
contact you on social media or email or whatever, and express, I would like to play for you. Is that something you accept? Like, you'll receive those kinds of inquiries?
Yes. And like I've said, the young flutists out there now have 10 times more education than I have. I mean, fabulous credentials.
Yeah.
I think I still would stand by recommendations from other people
Yep.
before I would say, oh, come and play for me. I would do both, but what other people have to say about you, as gossipy or silly as that might sound,
Yeah.
is very important to me.
Right. Plus, also, it could save a lot of time. If you just
Yeah.
ask somebody, what do you think about this person? They may say, like we've already said, like, well, they're have technique, no problem with technique, but they weren't prepared, or they kept talking, or they were on their
Hmm.
phone, and so it's like, okay, unless, like, well, maybe I'll go on to, number two.
Hmm.
So yeah, all that stuff makes a huge difference. But yeah, so being on a sub list is a good, if you can just get on sub lists, then I think you really start to make connections.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you never know when you're going to get that call.
Yep.
It could be a last minute thing, or it could be that the seven people ahead of you on the list are all either in Aruba or they've got a gig that weekend.
Right. Yeah, you never know when you're going to be needed. So it's sometimes it's like the long game. You just
Hmm.
stay available and in shape, and just keep at it, keep plugging away. Another thing, I think we're almost out of time here, but before we wrap up, another thing maybe to talk about, like you mentioned, being in Chicago is nice because it kind of lends itself naturally into a freelance scene from the colleges, where a lot of other cities don't have that to their advantage. So like, if I just go back to my other experience of living in Milwaukee, I was already an established freelancer in Chicago, but being in Milwaukee, I find that the kids going through the college, University of Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee or Madison, there's not, I mean, there's a little scene in Milwaukee, but there's not like Civic and Northwestern and DePaul and these giant schools where you get people from all over the world, and
Hmm.
the level is like the top, the very, very, very top. And it naturally lends itself to this freelancing scene because there's so many extra musicians, I think. I mean, you can form full orchestras with all these musicians that come out of
Yeah.
college. I guess that would go into the difficulty department. There's just so many.
Yes. Well, if you can diversify, and that really has to happen at a relatively young age. I would tell any parent of a 6-year-old, get them piano lessons. If they want to play an orchestra or band instrument later on, so much the better. If your child, who will grow into a student, a music student, can have a piano background, especially if they play well, the need for accompanists will never, ever, ever end. So if you can play your primary instrument, if you can play piano, if you can carry a tune, if you take a few conducting classes, you can lead a church choir, a children's choir. You can accompany, you could teach piano lessons in addition to flute lessons. If composition interests you, like we have one colleague, Dana Joris, who's an excellent composer. She's really, really good.
Really is.
So if you're a parent and you see these signs, try to nurture all of this right from the get-go. And if you're a young person, it's not too late. Really try to develop these other skills, because the number of flute players who are going to make a living in a full-time orchestra playing the flute, it's this many.
Like, I would say even 1%.
Yeah, yeah,
Really
it's
curious
just
on the,
yeah, it's a minuscule number. But if you can hone these other skills, um, you really are just going to be much better positioned as a freelancer. So if you don't have any orchestra work for 2 or 3 weeks, you still have your flute studio, or you're accompanying third grade Suzuki students on their little violins or something. Whatever a skill set you can possibly develop in music, do it. Don't say, oh, I don't want to play piano or whatever. Do it.
Right. Do it now, because you will be doing it eventually.
Yeah.
How I've found, like, never in a million years did I think I would ever conduct a flute choir or run a flute choir, but the opportunity came. And like you're saying, to diversify, another side note of that goes with it is to take opportunities that will diversify yourself.
Yes.
So you cannot just, it's very rare, for one, of course, to be a full-time orchestra flute player. That's it. That's like, just take that out of the equation. It might happen, but you're more likely to freelance on the flute. But then you're even more likely to freelance on the flute if you also do teaching and can play the piano, like you said. So you can accompany, be an organist at a church, or play piano at a church, or accompany a choir, because all of this is connected. So there could be somebody in the choir who knows somebody that wants to start an orchestra, or everybody is connected to everybody. And plus, like you said, it diversifies what you're doing, and eventually you get paid for those things, like running flute choir, or, you get paid for running your studio.
And let's not forget chamber music too. Like if you can establish, say, a flute, violin, cello trio and really market yourself to the wedding market, you can have a very successful summer by playing all those weddings. So chamber music, grab some people that you love, spend some time, invest in it, and then market yourself, and you can do pretty well with it.
Yeah. So diversifying is I think, one of the key things. And so what about so with freelancing, I find I have a range of experiences. Some were like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here right now doing this weird gig. And other times are just like spiritual, like amazing moments of music making, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So what are, just to kind of end our time together, can you remember any gigs that were maybe the most memorable, or the weirdest, or I don't know, just something kind of fun, either good or bad?
Well, Yes to all of that, but in 1 minute and 21 seconds,
Yeah.
you're not likely to hear all of it. I think the reason why we do what we do is when, like, you hear the last chords of Sibelius Second,
Mm.
or if you hear a magnificent performance of a Brahms symphony, Beethoven 9,
Yeah.
it can just reduce you to tears.
Yep.
And that's why we do what we do. And I can recall many, many, many moments over my career when I was just like, oh, that was the best thing I've ever played in my
Me
life.
too.
It's just really, truly moving.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. So persist, don't give up.
Yes, it's worth it. Well, thank you, Jean, so much for all this interesting insider, behind the scenes information. It's really so helpful.
Thanks,
Um,
Julia.
to all our up and coming flute players in the world. All
Good
right.
luck, all you flute players.